Only the Best Are Chosen, a short story by Jared I. McGee. She looked through the honeycombed steel threads of the shelter's caging complex and couldn't help but feel the ache of loneliness and remember. Not 3 days ago, or was it 4? Or was it weeks? Well, she was with her family, her mother, 2 brothers, and 4 sisters. Her father had left them a long time ago. Mother never really talked about him, though. From what she could gather, he was not a good boy. After some fighting incidents, he had disappeared, never to be seen again. Mother seemed to think that all of them forgetting about him would be the best thing for their little family. Father aside, her family was quite large and quite loving. She felt quite lucky each and every morning when she woke up among the warm bodies of her siblings. After a collective stretching and yawning session, she and her brothers and sisters would run and frolic and play, Mother always keeping a watchful eye but grinning all the while. Her mother enjoyed watching her younglings enjoy the world. Her family never had much, but they were happy. They were growing up out near some open fields where soybeans were grown. They'd found a nice, warm, and relatively dry corner of a barn. Supposedly, that's where they had all been born, and that's where Mother stayed to ensure her babies had something of some normalcy in their lives. Mother always said that the wandering, scrounging life that many that didn't have much chose was what made one truly an animal. So she refused to subject us to that. We were rarely full, but we were far from starving. We were far from clean, but we had fewer clumps of dirt, tangles of hair, and various parasitic beasties than most others of our means. That life only lasted a small while. The majority of my memory is actually of here, this place. A place of cold concrete and diamond-shaped holes, a place of wires and metal and howling and fear and disappointment. But disappointment is far too kind a word for what this place does to you. What it did to my mother, to my brothers, to my sisters, to me. We ended up here because some nosy farmer decided to come over and see if he could make use of our barn. Of course, we weren't meant to be in the structure. It wasn't actually ours after all. But he didn't have to call the authorities to come and arrest us and take us away from home. When they came for my family and me, everything was surreal and so very far removed from the immediacy of the moment. The sun was shining, the trees were swaying in the kind of gentle breeze we prayed for as summer quickly came upon us. The evening held the promise of frogs to chase, fireflies to goggle at, and the kind of relaxed, loving blanket of atmosphere that only sleepy summer nights with one's family can provide. Thick with possibility and laden with joy, the early evening that clung so hard to being afternoon in which we were picked up starkly contrasted the jostling and tossing the men in uniforms subjected us to. Mother yelped and barked instructions to us, making sure none of us fought or bit or lunged at or away from any of the uniformed men. She yowled over and over again that was death, that we needed to be accepting of this fate, be docile, so that we could all come back together in the end. We all obeyed. We always did. Though we could be a bit rowdy at times, we never ever disobeyed Mother, and definitely not when she was this serious. In truth, this was the first time I can remember seeing her scared. That alone was horror come to life for all of us. Our obeying and her early and repeated warnings did not help in the end. When the pitch-black vans with the cages in the back finally crunched to a halt on some gravelly road somewhere, and we were uploaded and we were unloaded and put rather roughly into the cages that I now call my home, we were missing both of our brothers. We were down from 8 to 6. Mother, my 4 sisters, and me. If things were bad at that point, the following days and weeks would see our family tested even further. Food was minimal, far more so than when Mother would come back to our barn with supper, even on the leanest of months. We were surrounded by others that cried and wailed and whined and growled and spit and yelled and howled into the night. We were in 3 separate units. 2 of my sisters in the unit to our left, 2 of my sisters in the unit to the right, and Mother and me in the middle unit. So we could not even huddle against one another in the evenings for comfort and some extra warmth on the occasional dip in temperatures on a relatively chilly summer evening spent on a concrete floor. The trials of our imprisonment were horrifying to us all. Mother tried to keep our spirits up, but she was clearly scared too. I'd never seen her quake and shiver, but every time the uniformed men would come around, she would start, and it would continue unchecked for hours after they left. We never saw my brothers again, but we never stopped peeking when new faces showed up either, always hoping we might be a family again. Then, the onlookers began to come. Mothers and fathers would bring their children to gawk and stare, touch and prod. They would talk about us like property and make decisions with the uniformed men on whom they should free that day. Often, families freed no one. Sometimes, families freed 2 or 3 at the same time. Time and again, we heard people say, "I'm sorry, we just can't take all 6. They would look at our cages with anger or regret or sadness or exasperation. 4 weeks in, or days? Weeks? Well, at least I think it was 4 weeks in, but being confined with no sunlight or moonlight by which to gauge the passing of days makes knowing that to be exceedingly difficult, I've found. My first 2 sisters were taken. Both were in the unit, to Mother and my right. They squealed and tried to hide. Mother growled and bared her teeth, but there was nothing any of us could do. The uniformed men drug my sisters away, the girls yelping all the way. Then the awful silence that always accompanied disappearances. We tried to look on the bright side. Every now and again we'd hear the uniformed men talking about one of the other prisoners going off and being happy, living with these new surrogate families. Yes, it was just a happier prison, but at least it wasn't the shiny steel room. Even the uniformed men hated the shiny steel room. When captives were taken in there, they did not come back. And from what we overheard on those days, they were being tossed out along with the garbage at the end of the day. Their bodies doomed to rot in a dump somewhere. So, happy prisons are still prisons, but at least they keep you alive. That's all what Mother would tell us over and over and over again after our first round of seizures from the pens. By 5 weeks in, we were all matted and dirty. That's how we knew they were weeks and not days. We did not really get the opportunity to clean ourselves as we once did in our barn. Though they tried to keep the place sterile and somewhat clean, it was a rat's nest compared to the way Mother had kept our corner of the barn. We knew we were filthy because we could tell one another, but also because the families that would come looked at us less and less as they moved through the halls. One phrase that made us shiver became a refrain, showing up over and over again amid the conversations.
Well, we would take them, but they're a bit grungy.
Well, that's okay, ma'am. We understand that. Only the best are chosen.
Well, we would take them, but they're a mixed breed, and we're looking for something a bit more high class.
We understand fully, sir. We understand that only the best are chosen.
Only the best are chosen, only the best are chosen, only the best are chosen was the phrase that gathered like vultures around a corpse. Once that phrase began to frequent the front of your cage, you were to expect a trip to the shiny steel room sooner rather than later. My remaining sisters and I were all quite young compared to the other prisoners, so that did work in our favor, as most that went to the shiny steel room were quite a bit older than us. But that truth did not help our mother. She was older. She was just as dirty and matted as we were, and she was well past her prime. So, it was absolutely jarring when she was the next to go. When the uniformed men came for her, I growled and I spit as best I could. They put a noose on a stick around my neck and held me back, taking Mother with another noose. My sisters and I whined and howled, waiting for them to head toward the corner of the complex with the shiny steel room, but to our surprise, they led her toward the front of the complex, where we saw a smiling woman with white hair waiting. Mother was quiet in that short journey from our shared cage to the front room, but she did pause one moment, pulling against the slack of the noose so she could look back at her 3 little girls one last time. My 2 older sisters cried. I smiled a bit through tears and called out, "Only the best are chosen, Mother!" It was only 2 days after that my sisters were taken from me in much the same way. Just like my other sisters and my brothers before them, they were stolen away together in a pair, leaving me the last member of our family, there in my cell alone. No one was in the cell to my left. No one was in the cell to my right. In fact, at this point, the prison in its entirety was almost fully empty. For whatever reason, the uniformed men had been working double time bringing families through and sending the angrier and older prisoners to the shiny steel room. So when the next couple came through with the men, I was all they saw. They seemed nice enough, clearly not very wealthy by the look of their threadbare thrift store clothes, but they smiled a lot, talked in hushed tones to one another and, then quite surprisingly, to me. They asked me if I was lonely. The woman said she hated it that I was alone and wished she knew where my brothers and sisters had gone. They asked me if I would like to be part of a new family, letting me know that they had a 3-year-old about to be 4-year-old son that was all alone and in desperate need of a big sister and best friend. His birthday was later that week, and I was meant to meet him then. They asked me my name. They asked me my name. I couldn't remember what Mother had called me. Plus, I didn't know if it would translate. When I just looked at the kind couple with big eyes, they only smiled back and told me not to worry. We would find a name that suited me when I was comfortable and bathed and fed and held and introduced to my new home along with their young son. They called out to the uniformed men that they wanted to take me home with them. When the uniformed men came to get me out of my cage with a noose on a stick, the man told them, "No way, sir," and instead knelt down, opened his arms, and urged me to come to him. I did. I hesitated for just a moment, and then I ran full speed and leapt into his waiting arms. The woman came over too, and they hugged me together, singing a silly little simple song. I love you, I love you, love you, love you, love you, love you, love you, love you. I love you. They jostled me up and down in the hug, singing and smiling. My heart swelled. First, my home and my perfect life. Then, my brothers, my sisters, my mother, and finally, my only remaining family, those last 2 sisters. All that had been stripped away. But here, literally holding on to me was a new life and a new family, not only willing to accept me, but that already immediately loved me for who I was. It wouldn't bring Mother back, or my brothers and sisters, but it felt good. In the few steps it took us to get to the front of the complex, the woman was already calling herself Mama, a slightly scary thing for me, but softened because she didn't choose Mother, and the man followed suit right thereafter, calling himself Daddy. We stepped from the concrete of the prison into the glass and linoleum of a front office. The woman stayed and signed some things while the man and I went outside. He put me down in the grass gently, and he sat right down by me. It was the first time I'd felt the sun in, 5 weeks. That's what I'd figured, right? 8 weeks? It had been a long time. The grass felt so soft beneath my feet. The man smiled, reached over, and scratched my head lightly. He said, "Your new little brother is going to love you more than anything in the world, little one. You are the best of all the best friends he could possibly hope for." As I sniffled a bit and blinked back tears for the second time already since meeting the couple, while staring almost directly at the glaring late summer sun, I beamed back at the man, turning my head to meet my eyes with his, and I prayed that my family had all found their new lives and their new families to be like these two angels that were rescuing me from the prison, full of kindness and love and acceptance. Yes, they had come in and taken me out of that cold concrete place, but I was also accepting them now, right now in this moment. Why? Why so fast? Because they too were the best, and only the best are chosen. The woman came bounding out of the prison, arms raised, whooped, and beckoned the man and I to chase her into a field for a little playtime before we headed home. Thank you for listening to Only the Best Are Chosen. The musical track in the background of this story comes from the Free Music Archive. The track is titled Chance, Luck, Errors in Nature, Fate, Destruction as a Finale. It is by Chris Zabriskie from his album Reappear. The track is being used under an Attribution 4.0 international license. Please head over to freemusicarchive.org or to chriszabriskie.com, that is ChrisZabriskie.com for more of his music. Our second story this week is the continuation of the novel we've been experiencing for several weeks now. Before you head off on a new adventure with Tilo, please do go check out the back episodes and get all caught up. Now, on to the world of the Ants of Fire.